So until such time as I am able to play the Knights of the Old Republic games, I'm going to shelve the Revan review, and I will talk about it at a later time. When I'll be able to get to it relies entirely on whenever I finish playing the video games.
Wow, I filmed that sucker a long time ago, didn't I? Almost 3 years it has taken me to finally get around to reviewing The Old Republic, Revan, written by Drew Karpyshyn. Now, a lot has changed in 3 years. I've changed homes twice since then. I'm wearing the same shirt, though. This is the exact same shirt I was wearing when I filmed that video all those years ago. I can't believe AJ's been in the WWE this long. That's just crazy. But in any case, why did it take me so long to get around to finally reviewing this thing? Well, it took me forever to get around to playing the video game. And I finally got around to finishing it, playing it. I enjoyed it. RPGs typically aren't my thing, but I found Knights of the Old Republic to be interesting and enjoyable, and it gave me additional context for Revan and why he is such a revered character among really diehard Star Wars fans, especially those that are familiar with the video games. So it gave me a little bit of more of appreciation for Revan, and something I didn't have originally when I first read the book over 3 years ago. Now, also, point of interest, there was even further delays with getting this video out. I just spent the last half an hour chasing a fly around my office. Sucker was just everywhere, and I just couldn't kill the thing. Yeah, I would have had better luck trying to kill the thing with chopsticks, but I think he finally got bored and just landed on my chair over there and just said, "All right, you can kill me," and I killed him, and okay. So I almost had a co-star for this video, but so the fly's dead. The game is played, the book is read. Let me finally dive into this thing and review it. So Revan has an interesting distinction in my Star Wars book collection. Chronologically, it is the earliest story in the timeline that I own, of all the books that I own from the expanded universe. It's not the earliest book in the complete canon. I'm looking at the timeline here. They have two stories ahead of it. Dawn of the Jedi, Into the Void, and Lost Tribe of the Sith, the collected stories, which I've never read those, but those sound like kind of Genesis-style stories, almost like they would be Star Wars equivalent of the Silmarillion. So Revan has an interesting distinction of being the earliest book, chronologically the earliest book that I've read. Although it is a sequel to the Knights of the Old Republic video game, which has an interesting twist in it that I will spoil here for those of you who haven't played the game. But as it turns out, the character that you choose is ultimately revealed to be Darth Revan, who got usurped and had the Sith army taken away from him and had his memory erased. And at the end of the game, you challenge Darth Malak, and you, as you confront him, you choose to go to either the light side or the dark side, and the game goes in whatever direction you choose. As far as canon is concerned, as far as this book is concerned, the book operates as if you picked the light side, and Revan turned out to be a good guy in the very end. So, yeah, so that's really where we start off. We start off with Revan. He's a Jedi now. He's living on Coruscant with his wife, who's also a character in the game. And he's still trying to reclaim his lost memories. Meanwhile, there is Lord Scourge, a Sith warrior who is seeking immortality and wants to... By the way, I love the name Scourge. I mean, it just continues that joke I keep making where some of the Sith names, they sound like Decepticons. There is a Darth Ravage. One of these days I'm going to open one of these things and there's going to be a Darth Megatron. That would be hilarious. But in any case, Scourge and Revan end up crossing paths at one point in the book. But before we get into all that, like Revan goes along with a friend to search for the Mask of the Mandalores, the Mandalorian mask. I forget what it's called, but it's interesting way of tying in like Mandalorian history with the character of Darth Revan. And I guess he's not Darth anymore now that he's a Jedi in this story. But really, the early portion of the book is about the fallout from the Knights of the Old Republic game and Revan trying to reclaim his lost memories. And then the book takes a huge detour where, sorry, I thought I heard another fly there. Oh, jeez. See, now I'm going to be seeing flies everywhere. The book takes a huge detour where Revan gets captured, and then we jump ahead 3 years, and then that next portion of the book is the sequel to Knights of the Old Republic 2, which I have not played, and I'm not going to get into that. I've spent my time. I'm good. I'm all good. But really, when I first read the book, that was what floored and confused me more than anything else, because man, oh man, these time jumps were just really, really jarring. And I didn't really think much of the book the first time I read it, because again, I hadn't played the video games, and I kind of expected, and I mentioned this in my video 3 years ago, I kind of expected this book to be a complete history of the character of Revan, with the events of the game worked into it. That is not what this is. This is more of a companion piece to the games, to fill in the blanks after the games are completed, or to be a bridge from game 1 to game 2. And to that end, I think the book is effective at doing that. And once you have that understanding that that's how the novel plays out, it's actually a pretty enjoyable read. First time I read it, it was extremely jarring. Like, extremely, extremely jarring, which is my fault. I should have played the game first. Or at least read a synopsis of the game and gotten more familiar with the character of Revan. Because really, Revan and his popularity among some diehard fans was what really made me want to check this out. That and my interest in the Old Republic books, which are, a very fascinating era in the Star Wars timeline, at least the old timeline before Disney changed everything. Because it is so far removed from all the movies and even the prequels. It predates those so much that it really opens up the writers' freedom to pretty much do whatever they want without worrying about breaking from continuity. There's really... from that era of Star Wars, the movies don't give you much, except maybe the rule of two and the idea that the Jedi ultimately defeated the Sith, and the Sith were thought to be extinct for 1,000 years. That's pretty much it. Like, anything else, you pretty much make it up, and you're good to go. And what makes the Old Republic era so interesting is that in the original trilogy, the Sith are in control, and the Jedi are almost extinct. In the prequel trilogy, the Jedi are in control, and the Sith are almost extinct, and they're working from underneath to try and overthrow the Jedi. And then in the sequel trilogy, both of them are basically dead, and struggling to survive. But in the Old Republic era, it's almost like this mythical, almost like, I almost want to compare it to like Arthurian legend almost, where it's like Knights of the Round Table and all this other stuff, where both sides have these large armies of fully trained knights, both the Jedi and the Sith, and they're at constant war with each other over the fate of the Republic. And that's really interesting, and, kind of something that's not really covered in the movies, because it's always about rebellions and empires and yada, 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 all that other stuff. So here, it's a little bit different, where they're both sides are on equal footing trying to overthrow the other, and they really mined a lot of good stuff out of there. I've already read and reviewed Annihilation, which is actually the video where I said I wasn't going to be reviewing Revan, and that turned out to be one of my favorite Star Wars books ever. And there's the Darth Bane trilogy, also written by Drew Karpysh, and he actually wrote Annihilation too, so I really enjoy his work, actually. And the Darth Bane trilogy was really good. So they've gotten a lot of really good stuff out of the Old Republic era, even outside of the video games. And it's not hard to see why the fan base, or there's this part of the fan base, which I guess you can count myself as part of that now, where we would like to see a movie based on the Old Republic era, because I'm like, if you want to do anything truly fresh and original with Star Wars, going all the way back to that era might be the way to go. And they can even cover things that weren't necessarily covered in the games or the books, not to a strong degree anyway. But how was going to hyperdrive first developed, and how was what were the wars between the Sith and the Jedi really like, and were the Jedi back then how we saw them in the prequel series, and then how we saw them in the sequel trilogy. They could work to answer questions like that, rather than, doing what they kind of did here with the sequel trilogy, which was just kind of redo everything all over again. But, and trust me, I'm going to have plenty to say about Episode 9 when we get closer to that film's release, so don't you worry, I'll be on it. But anyway, so I'm through, I've already talked about the first portion of this book, which is really about Revan. Then we get to the second part of the book, which, again, really confused me when I read it the first time. where a character known as the Exile, who is the main focus of Knights of the Old Republic 2, and Lord Scourge, they ultimately get tangled up in this mission to save Revan and ultimately try to overthrow the Sith Emperor. Sounds familiar to some degree. So Revan's really in captivity for this part of the story, and it's more about the Exile and Lord Scourge and their alliance and where Lord Scourge's loyalties lie as far as that goes. So that stuff was very interesting, and again, I haven't played Knights of the Old Republic 2, so a little confusing to some degree. But I've done my research, I've done my reading, so I'm about as up to it as I'm going to be without actually playing the game. And that stuff was also fun and interesting, and Lord Scourge proved to be a very duplicitous character and quite interesting, despite the Decepticon-sounding name. He's actually a little bit more three-dimensional than one would expect, and always acting in his own self-interests, but sometimes that involves going against what the Sith wants and kind of aligning himself with the Jedi. And that's really basically it. What this book is, as I've said before, it is a companion piece to the Knights of the Old Republic video games. And if you love the Knights of the Old Republic video games, I think this book is going to be good for you. And I think it follows the first game up. I haven't played the second one, but it follows the first one up really, really well. If you're not into the video games, you're going to be like me the first time I read this, and you're going to be utterly, utterly like lost and confused. And at the very least, you should read a plot summary of the games before you dive into this sucker right here. It's very interesting. I wonder why they never got around to doing a novelization of the Knights of the Old Republic games. They did with Force Unleashed, which I've heard they're terrible, but the novelizations for those. But it would have been nice to get them here, and I could have had like a nice little Revan trilogy to go along with the other Old Republic stories that I have. But overall, I found Revan to be an engaging character, and both in the game and in the book. And it's very interesting to see how his choices affect the events of the stories. And really, like I said, the twist in the video game was really good. It really makes him a really, really interesting character, despite which option you ultimately go with, whether you choose light side or dark side. But Revan is one of those iconic gems from the expanded universe and that era of Star Wars, and deserves some praise. So I'm going to give the book some love, too. So I'm going to give the grade a B for the book, with the caveat that you have to be familiar with at least a basic familiarity with the games to really understand the book. Because that's really the major, I guess you could say, flaw with the book, is that it doesn't really stand on its own really well. It does rely on the games to kind of give it its material, but if you know the games and you enjoyed them, then you'll probably like this too. I enjoyed it, so take that for what it's worth. Now, in next month's review, I'm going to be diving into even more Old Republic stories, the final two that I have not reviewed yet, and I have read both of these. Deceived by Paul Kemp and Fatal Alliance by Sean Williams. Both of those were very interesting reads, and I cannot wait to talk about them, but you'll have to wait until the end of August for those. This is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching and supporting this channel, and once again, my apologies for the delays in getting this review out there, but like I said, it took a while to get to the video game, so what can you do? But that is all I have for you now. Thanks again, everybody, for watching, and stay tuned for more. I'll have another Star Wars review up for you at the end of August, so stay tuned for that.